Good evening, everyone. I'm Lynn Henson with the Planning Department, and we'll have the presentation up in just a second. Thank you, Dahlia. Thank you for being here for the East Houston Neighborhood Resilience Plan. We'd like to talk to you about resilience in East Houston. Neighborhood resilience is focused on bringing additional resources to communities and increasing the ability for residents and the community at large to prepare for and recover from shocks that might occur in the community. Now, you can think about shocks and stressors as climate events. So like hurricanes, floods, and even in Houston, it might be a tornado or two. Of course, heat, we're experiencing that right now. And the extreme heat, like Storm Uri that happened in 2020. But resilience also includes things like different types of resources that improve economic development, may improve infrastructure, and even increase social empowerment. Next slide. And if you could go ahead to the next slide. We have 3 neighborhood resilience plans, and one is in East Houston. Thank you, Dahlia. In the next slide. I'm going to try to go through these slides pretty quickly, just so that you have enough opportunity to ask questions and talk with us this evening. So we are on Zoom, and I want to ask that through the presentation, if you'll please keep your microphones on mute. We will be having a breakout session to give you an opportunity to speak with us. I'm going to ask, Marcus is on the line with the City of Houston. He is going to place a link in the chat, which is a sign-in. We'd love to have you sign in so that we can update you about the process of this project. We'll be having 3 meetings and deliver a final plan. So we want to make sure that we have your voice and your response throughout this process. Next slide. So this evening, we'll look at really what's this framework about neighborhood resilience. What does it mean and why are we here? Talk to you about the objectives and the climate impacts, and then go into the breakout groups. We'll come back into this main room from the breakout groups, do a wrap up, and then I want to mention some city resources. Even though we're doing this plan that will identify strategies in the community, we already have some tools at the City of Houston that you can use to improve the community. Next slide. So again, this meeting tonight is for you, the East Houston Super Neighborhood. And I want to acknowledge that we recognize there are many neighborhoods in the City of Houston that need additional resources, but these 3 are where we're starting with this process. So within East Houston, we have had support and guidance from the Neighborhood Support Team, or NST, in this process. And I want to recognize people that have helped us in this process so far, including Philip Jones, Abner Lyons, Kimberly Lee, Cynthia Martinez, Pastor Woods, Pastor Piles, Doris Brown, Janice Thomas, and Miss Vicky. And if I missed anyone, you can take yourself off mute and shout that out. It is my goal to make sure that we show how appreciative we are for your guidance and support in this process. Yes, this is another plan, but I want to make sure that you understand, we know that there's been other planning activities in the community, and that includes the Greater Houston Flood Mitigation Consortium, done by Rice and Kinder, CDRC, and U of H, as well as the CCDI, or the Collaborative Community Design Initiative, talks about design resources, again, with U of H, and even the GHFMC East Houston briefing book. So These planning efforts and maybe a few others are going on in your community, and we want you to know that we've heard you. We understand so far that, yes, you have issues around flooding and buyouts, opening the library, it could be equity or aging, bike routes, there's so many things. And the discussion tonight, if we have missed anything, we want to make sure we capture that for this process. Dahlia, could you go back a slide? Because I want to make sure that we get the slide on the team up, who we are. I'm with the planning department at the City of Houston. We are supported by the housing department for this process. On the call tonight is Jennifer Oslin, our deputy director, Marcus Tucker, our project coordinator, Jackie Brown, our planner 2, and I want to let you know that the director, Margaret Wallace Brown, sends her greetings tonight as well. Also on the call is our consultant team that is helping us with this process. I'll just roughly mention Matthias Bao, who is the project lead for the consultant team, Dahlia Munenzen, Rainey Jones, Nupur, Danielle Getzinger, Teresa Anthony. And I hope I've mentioned everyone that's on the call tonight. Again, if not, if I miss someone, take yourself off mute and just shout out your name.
Working on it from Texas, Cleo Johnson.
And Miss Cleo is on the line. Thank you, Miss Cleo. Can you, Dahlia, forward to the, yes, thank you. So a little bit about our resilience and why we're doing this. The City of Houston recognizes, again, that neighborhoods need support, need additional services. In Resilient Houston, which is the plan that you see at the top right on the slide, is Houston's first resilience and sustainability plan. And in that plan, Houston began to define what resilience means for it. And that includes the capacity, I'm going to actually read this part, the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within urban areas to survive, adapt, and thrive no matter what kinds of chronic stressors or acute shocks that they might experience. So I want to highlight that the second chapter in Resilient Houston, if you can go to the next slide, is all about creating safe and equitable neighborhoods, because neighborhoods are the heart of Houston, they're the heart of the community. Resilient Houston recognizes all 88 super neighborhoods across the city of Houston. And we know that every community is different. So each community may have different needs and different priorities. And so we want to capture that in the neighborhood resilience plan for East Houston. That can, again, that can include flooding or air quality or mobility, economic development, and so much more. Next slide. So the objective, resilience, again, can be anything. We want to make sure that we capture what resilience means for you, for East Houston, because East Houston's plan is going to look a little bit different from the other two communities that we're doing, depending on what is made up in the community. So part of our discussion with you tonight will start off and focus on environment and climate related items like Hurricane Harvey and Storm Uri. But we want, through that discussion, for what's important to you to come out and be captured. There will be a facilitator in your breakout rooms that will lead the discussion, and a note taker to capture what is being said. Next slide, please. So your voice, the regional environment, the City of Houston, other local organizations, other elected offices, all of this helps make up the neighborhood. And we call this a nested scale. because all of these elements will be working together. What we have heard of importance to you through previous plans and in this process will come out. The goal of this nested scale is to bring infrastructure, economy, improvability to the community to improve East Houston. Next slide. So on this timeline, you'll see several dates. I want to highlight 3 important things. We are at public event number 1. Now, even though we're at a public event, we have been out in the community. The One Architecture team has been out at our neighborhood support team meetings. We've driven around the community and talked to individuals in the community. We've had sticky events. Those are things where we go out to events that are happening in the community and talk about this process. We had an in-person meeting at Lakewood Community Center. This is all around public engagement number 1, where we're asking for information from you. We're going to bring that, formulate a draft and bring that to you in public event number 2, which will happen somewhere around September, maybe October, to ask you, did we hear this right? Did we get it right? Is anything missing? And then formulate and finalize that plan and bring it back to you to present at a 3rd public event in around November. The final plan will be presented to the community around the end of the year, beginning of next year. So I'm going to stop now and turn it over to our consultant team. We'll talk to you a little bit more about resilience.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Danielle Getzinger, and I am a consultant on that one team, and I am working specifically on community engagement, specifically on making sure that the community's voices are not only heard, but also reflected in this plan, and that this plan is going to be a useful document for the community. It reflects your needs, but it also is something that's useful for you to advocate for certain projects to move forward, for you to be able to use to go after your organization's funding, for you to be able to use your civic club meetings, your HOAs, your churches, and various other organizations to support resiliency, how you see resiliency. Next slide, Delia. You go to the next slide. Okay, I got stuck. Okay, so the project objectives. The project objectives are to co-develop this with the community and to build capacity through this planning process. So we're hoping at the very least, this is going to be an opportunity to build up the education of the community on what we mean by resilience, education around what to expect and what the projections are with climate events and increased climate threats, if you will, strength of storms, strength the heat that we're all experiencing right now. So our objectives are to co-develop and to build community capacity. We also need to foster effective paths for communication. One thing that we are hearing is that a lot of resources exist, a lot of programs exist. It's just that a lot of times people don't know about them. So we see this as an opportunity to strengthen those lines of communication so that's going back both ways. We are looking to identify some pretty big long-term capital improvement projects and as well as social programs. We're looking for both the near-term and those long-term solutions, and for that to adapt with what those projections for increased flooding, increased strength of hurricanes and heat and cold, as we experienced with Uri. And again, in terms of that long-term term, we're also looking for designing policies and actions for neighborhood transformation. Not all of this is in infrastructure or even in social programs. And we have a lot of representatives from elected officials on the line. So take that opportunity to engage you there and in that policy action. There needs to likely be some tweaks to policy as well. So those are our objectives for the project. And Dahlia, if you can go to the next slide. And Juan Soto, I see you. And I'm definitely going to address that question. Thank you for bringing that up, asking how it's different than Susan Rogers' plan. And there's the slide. My gosh, it's almost like you predicted that. It is a little bit different than Susan Rogers' plan, only in that it builds on the momentum that Susan Rogers had. And it was really great that she came to our first public meeting. And I know that maybe many of you have worked with her or worked with some of those other efforts in the neighborhood. So what we've done is we've taken those plans and we've taken elements out of those plans and we're building on that momentum. We're not trying to recreate things that have already been done. This is the first plan that is led by the city to address the flood and climate resilience at the neighborhood level, with the goal of directing resources into the community. Again, Lynn talked about that nested approach. So this being that the Resilient Houston plan was a bigger plan, this dives down deep into the neighborhood, but still reflects a lot of that work that was done in that framework that was done in that Resilient Houston plan. We are committed to grounding this in meaningful community participation and co-designing those resilient strategies with the community and making sure that the lived experience of the residents and business owners and other stakeholders is not only reflected in the plan, but prioritized. That this is, like Lynn said, the first kind of series of public engagements. We will have 2 more series in the fall, or early fall, late summer, and then again near the end of the year. So there will be plenty of opportunities to engage, and we'll talk more about that. And the team is composed of local nonprofits, local engineers. I'm local here in Houston, and the Black United Fund of Texas has a long 25-year history of serving the communities throughout the greater Houston area. So we brought them in specifically to ground this work in that meaningful understanding of that lived experience that many of us from sitting in various spaces throughout the country, coming at it from our certain level of expertise, you can't replace that real lived experience, and that's what Buff and as well as you bring to the table. So next plan. Let me explain what we mean by climate risks and impacts. Now the climate risks and impacts is really, is a broad definition of resilience, but we're really leading with those climate risks and impacts. So the next slide. We're experiencing this right now. Many of you, this extreme heat and cold. And so what we have here are 2 graphs kind of just showing the projections over the course of time. And we don't necessarily need to go into a lot of details here, but as you can see, the colored bars are going up. They're going up. We know that it's becoming hotter. We're projected to be hotter. We keep hitting higher and higher temperatures, and we're dipping down into the colder temperatures. And how that relates to resiliency, of course, that has an effect on our infrastructure, on our homes, on our energy bills, on our health, on crime. There's links to that. So that's one of the things we mean with climate. Next. And of course, East Houston has experienced pretty severe flooding during Harvey. So the way that we think about flooding, if you're looking at this is a cross section. So, some common flooding would be that road and property drainage. And as the community is going out here in a couple of weeks to clean out those drains, you guys know too well that the drains get clogged. They get clogged with the illegal dumping, they get clogged with just debris. So that does back up and create issues from the stormwater management perspective. We also are looking at the bayou system and our waterways. And if you look at the color scheme, I want you to remember this color scheme being that the floodway is kind of just that the normal elevation. And as you go into the 100-year floodplain, so one of those floods that happens 1 in 100 years, that's in that light blue. And then a little bit higher there when it reaches the banks and it starts to flood into the homes. If you're following that dotted line across and where that would hit those homes, that's where you would experience that 500 flood, that 500-year floodplain. So this is a cross section, and then we're going to, again, remember the colors, because then we're going to look at that on the map. So go ahead. So we're going to go, I propose that we were talking about breakout groups. We have only about a half an hour. And I kind of want to just engage to the temperature of the room for staying here and engaging. I know that all of you probably know each other, are familiar with each other. So wanted to know, maybe show chat or hands, if you'd feel comfortable having a discussion here as we interview the community, lead you through a conversation, or would you prefer to break out into to smaller groups?
I think we'll just, I'm okay with just continuing with the presentation, and
Okay.
that'll afford people to get their questions or comments together so that we'll all know the questions and not have to repeat them or anything like that.
That's perfect.
So
Okay.
we can just remain.
Okay, that was what the read of the room was, so perfect. Thank you, Vicki, for confirming that. So what we'll do is, Dahlia, do you want to bring up that Miro board? And if you haven't used a Miro board, this is a way, a presentation that we can add some sticky notes in and some comments as you speak. And I'm also looking at the chat. And Courtney with the K, you have your hand up. Did you want to say something? Maybe that's left over from earlier. Okay, so if you do want to come off mute and say something, feel free to raise your hand. We want this to be a conversation. We're here to listen. This is being recorded, and we will be putting this up on Let's Talk Houston. I believe Marcus has already shared that link. It's a place, a repository for a lot of comments, and we'll walk through that as well. So if anybody, this was the welcome to the group. We've heard, we can move on to the next. So what we're asking through this exercise is your perspective, your lived experience of the past impacts from climate events like Harvey, like Uri. It could just be this past weekend or this last week we had a heavy rain. So what was your past impacts from that, and how did it impact your access to community assets and resources? So we have some specific questions. What major CIP projects, Courtney, I see you. What major CIP projects and social programs were you referring to? We haven't created them yet. So that is something that we're hoping to do through this process, is to understand what is already being done, and also to identify what needs to be done. So that's a big focus of ours. So if you have any ideas, drop them in the chat, drop them in the Miro board. Go ahead, the next one. Okay, so again, we're just going to quickly go over the session guidelines. I want to just acknowledge everyone's, voice and time. So if you have to say something, put your hand up, and I will call on you. And I see two. Let me just get through this real quick, and then I'm going to call on Vicki and Juan. We would like you to share your lived experience. Please use I went out of order. Please use the hand raising button. Anytime you would like to leave this isn't a breakout session, but we also respect your time. So if you do need to leave the meeting, know it's being recorded and can be accessible later on. So with that, Vicky, would you like to say something?
I can hold if you have a moment in it for the presentation, but I put my question in the chat.
Okay.
Community residents are asking, because Union Pacific Railroad is a big force in the community, how do they factor into mitigating the flooding and the climate and all of that, because they are a environmental contributor in our area?
Okay. I hear you. I don't have an answer for you, but I thank you for that, because that is something that we'll definitely note into the plan and into the analysis, and something that would need to be addressed. Yes. Juan, you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So many of you in this chat kind of already know who I am, and so I'm going to try to not sound aggressive, but this is more speaking of someone with extreme passion, especially for someone that lives a few blocks away from the Lakewood Community Center. I was here for Hurricane Harvey. I've been here since 2001. And since Hurricane Harvey, we've seen this community just plain and simple exhausted of having to be case studies for all types of organizations. And so that's why I asked earlier about, what's different than Susan Rogers' plan. And obviously Lynn mentioned that, yes, this is another plan to another plan to another plan. And so my biggest advice to you and to the people that are overseeing this initiative is why hopefully we could be a little bit more original, in the sense that what this community honestly needs is a capacity plan and not necessarily a plan to address all these issues. Because what happens here is that we have a lot of fragmented groups that are not working together, and those individual groups are kind of fighting for the same resources, when in reality we should all be kind of addressing those same issues. But I think the overlying root cause of these fragments is the fact that we don't necessarily have anyone teaching us how to properly run organizations. And I feel that, what could be different about this particular plan of action is maybe, leaving us with some kind of tools to build a capacity plan, or maybe give us those tools that we can go out there and attain these capacity plan. In other words, how do you sustain an organization, whether it's a civic club, whether it's a super neighborhood, whether it's NAC or West Street Recovery, which I think, in my opinion, West Street Recovery is probably one of the most stable groups that we have in our community. But even then, they are limited in their capacity just because of the scale of what they're able to do. But what makes West Street Recovery extremely, in my opinion, very effective is that they have money behind their cause. And all the rest of us, if we do have some kind of money, we just do not know how to utilize that money properly. And so how do you bring in some experts to teach us how to maintain an organization, and also for that organization to ask what's already been created in these plans over years and years and years that they've been developed around. So I just wanted to say that, because I feel like that could be, to me, different than opposed to going through the same process that we've been through already for, with so many different organizations in the past.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that one. And that is something that we recognized early, and one of the reasons why we brought the Black United Fund of Texas in, as well as enterprise community partners. But yeah, we're going to put a pin in that, because I want to let other people talk. But definitely thank you for sharing that, because that's something we've observed and something that needs to happen. Courtney with the K, you have your hand up.
Yes, I came over here to this other meeting, so I just wanted to be brief. I would like to echo the sentiments of Mr. Soto. We're encountering a situation where they're bringing in people to do the work that they could teach us how to do. You give a man a fish, you feed a man for a day. But if you teach a man a fish, you feed a man for a lifetime. We need to be taught to fish. We do not need other organizations to continue come in, and y'all are only giving an outlet to like 1 or 2 organizations when it's 10 or 15 of us within Super Neighborhood 4950. That's one. And I was at the last resiliency meeting. It felt more like a networking event, like more of us just kind of making friends and less of us having like a purpose, you know, and it just didn't feel like we were getting anything accomplished, in my opinion. It felt like a huge networking event. We ate, we put some sticky notes if we chose to, and then we got out of there. And so I don't think that's like the best utilization of our time. Those are the opportunities where we can talk about these CIP projects. We have a lot of stuff that we want to get done, and we already know where it's at. So just thank you.
No, thank you for that. And know that we have taken your sticky notes, and that was very helpful. In the next meeting, in the next phase of that, it will be concept development. So we're coming up with those concepts, those strategies, and that session should be, I hope, very much worth your time. So appreciate that. And anybody else before I move on to the next, going through some of these boards? Nope. Okay. You go to the next one, Dahlia. Okay, so we're gonna work with that flooding map, like I said, and discuss how the impacts of flooding affect your well-being. So we're going to use that kind of to put pins in the map. If anybody wants to share any areas that are significantly flooded, or assets that were cut off because of flooding, do you want to go over to that map, Dahlia? And okay, we're going to do a zoom in here. This is what the flood data is telling us. The data is only as good as its source. We believe it's fairly accurate. And we just wanted to do that ground truth to the community, make sure that we didn't miss a big blob somewhere that definitely flooded, but also within the floodplain and outside of the floodplain, how did this flooding at its most extreme, and also on a day-to-day basis, how does that affect your daily life? How is there a location that you can pinpoint on here that say, I can't get to this important community asset, or it would be really great if we could update this corridor for evacuations, which I know was in Susan Rogers' plan with the evacuation route. So that is something that has been noted. Anybody want to put a dot on the map?
And perhaps Danielle, I don't know, just in addition, thinking of the comments we just received from Courtney, perhaps we can also leverage this opportunity to think if there are these capital improvement projects or things that you know that you want or should be improved, we can also start identifying them on this map so we could see how we incorporate them in concepts. Mm-hmm. And we also review the plan from Susan Rogers and from the university. So we're also evaluating the things that they propose. So if there's anything specific that you think we should emphasize or focus on, this is also will be very helpful for us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, also too, the map is just a bit of a catalyst. Oh, go ahead, Juan. I saw you come off.
Yeah, I do want to add, again, because Susan Rogers' plan was super detailed and honestly, she spent a lot of time here in East Houston and really get into the root causes of typology, in so many ways, community engagement, so forth. But anyway, one of the things that that plan highlights is protecting our wetlands that we have available in our community. And unfortunately, those protected areas that we highlighted as a community are currently being threatened ever since Hurricane Harvey actually happened. So as you may have noticed during your in-person meeting, right across the Lakewood Community Center, there is a huge housing development that obviously just was put in place there. And that was identified as a protected wetland. Right now it is, again, I'm not trying to sound kind of, bitter. I think I'm more just passionate about it, because it seems that, when Hurricane Harvey happened, we were begging for people to notice us, to know about who we were. But I think that notice went a little bit to the extreme, because now you have developers literally building on these areas that we know are flood prone, and they've been flood prone on every single natural disaster that we've had. And right along the bayou, for example, right there next to Fiesta, where I live like a block away from, they have been building left and right. And so I just don't know what could we, and I think I go back to this thing about capacity building, right? That if the community was probably better prepared to explain the tools that you and every expert that comes around here gives us, maybe we would be able to advocate more aggressively for, like, hey, don't build right across the elementary school that Yao Ming and all these movie stars came to visit right after Hurricane Harvey, because it was flooded. And so that's, to kind of put in Susan Rogers' plan, is that she has identified so many wetlands, so many protected areas, but right now they're leaving. They're being misplaced by developers, overtaken by developers, I should say. So I think acknowledging that we have wetlands, but also what do we do to protect them in this plan?
Got it. Thank you for that. Yes. And I think we have another slide somewhere in our stack of slides, those wetlands that you identified, Susan Rogers identified. We have gone through those plans many times and pulled that out. And it's really awesome to hear hear that come back up. That kind of reiterates the need for that.
Excuse me, thank you. I just want to say we have 20 minutes, just letting you know time. You're fine. You can carry us through the end. I'm just letting you know we have 20 minutes.
Okay, no, that's good. That's great. Thank you for that time check. And Dahlia, we can keep here or we can keep moving on. And again, on Let's Talk Houston, you can basically do the same exercise and put in those comments on Let's Talk Houston as well. So if this is new to you, then you want some time to sit with it, please feel free to just go to Let's Talk Houston or come to our next session and see where, engage at that point. Okay, Dahlia. You want to zoom in? I can't read that small. Okay. Extreme heat and cold. And maybe since this is so hot right now, what is the current experience in East Houston? I think that a lot of the maps show, relative to other places in the city, East Houston has more tree coverage, more green space. So, compared to downtown, it might not appear as hot, but it's hot. It's still hot, and are people struggling? Are they struggling with air conditioning? Are they struggling with public transit? What do we know right now in the moment that we're in with the heat? How are people coping?
Yes, I'll answer that question too. Not very well. Again, I'm talking about my subdivision right across the Lakewood Community Center, or north of it, I should say. If you take a drive through my subdivision at the moment, you will see a bunch of houses that still have tarp from Hurricane Harvey. And so I could just imagine those homes, if they still have tarp and if they haven't been able to fix their roof, I could just imagine the fact that a lot of these individuals can't even afford an AC unit. And I know a few of them actually, that's the sad part about it. My next door neighbors are a few of those individuals. So when it comes to coping with extreme, natural disaster, whether it was, Winter Storm Uri, same deal. So we have a large concentration of elderly people that live in East Houston, a huge concentration. And also non-English speakers, meaning Spanish speakers. According to the last census data, there's about 40% Latinos or Hispanics that called East Houston their home. That's actually number, I want to say, is probably higher than that because I've kind of been tracking that myself since I've been living here. And so you have that language barrier, in particularly the community that West Street Recovery, the subdivision that West Street Recovery focuses a lot of their attention on. You met a few of those members during the last community meeting. And so, yeah, you have this imbalance happening right now with the extreme weather where you have seniors and you have non-English speaking population, both impacted by the fact that they don't know how to attain these, AC units, or maybe they're still struggling with the aftermath of this other extreme storms.
Okay, that's really helpful. So coming back to that connectivity theme, just the communications between these.
Could I chime in for a minute?
I would love it. Thank you.
This is Abner Lyons. How's everybody doing? I do want to give some positive feedback in regards to what has come to East Houston since Harvey, not only from Harris County, but the city of Houston. I think one can support when Harvey hit afterwards, Mr. Blackburn with Rice University, we were supporting the bond they were trying to pass for flood mitigation. And we discovered just a couple of weeks ago, while we were on the Fifth Ward Super Neighborhood call, that that the city of Houston didn't get a single penny, but East Houston Hall's Bio bond was passed for $200 million. And the fact is that we have not flooded on that bio since Harvey. Not only that, we also got $22 million from the city of Houston, from Mayor Sylvester Turner himself, to remove 2 of the waste treatment plants in our community, one in Verta Forest and one in Lakewood. That's over $222 million that has been invested to prevent flooding in our community. Those are some huge milestones for our communities. And then on top of that, Councilmember Jackson had the city of Houston to invest, along with Rodney Ellis, flooding litigation over in the Lake Forest community, where Juan is talking about, where West Street Recovery has worked so diligently with that population. So there have been some very positive, not only positive outcomes, but monies that have been invested in preventing us from flooding. And so with the neighborhood support team, we're now able to capitalize on what has already taken place to better and to ensure us that these things won't take place again. I don't know if you guys know this, and I'm gonna close with this, but Habitat for Humanity will have the largest detention pond in the city of Houston, not the state of Texas. I think it will hold 92 million gallons of water in case of flood on the other side of Tidwell. So there are a lot of positive things that are taking place in East Houston. Now, I do want to put this in the notes. If anybody does not have an air conditioner, please call my office, Representative Dutton, and I will get in touch with Sheila Jackson Lee in the mayor's office. We give air conditioning units to homes for free. No one should be without an air conditioning unit. So please give us a call. We are here to help the community in any capacity when it comes to somebody that's just sitting there in the heat and nobody's reporting. So please report that to us. We'll be more than happy to assist you. We would never turn anybody down.
Thank
Thank
you,
y'all for
Albert.
taking your time out. But I'm very optimistic on where we're headed, and I'm thankful for what the monies that has already been put in our community to prevent such catastrophic disasters that we've experienced in the past.
All right, thank you, Albert. Mhm.
Okay, Vicky, if you I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no problem. Time 12 minutes left. Thank you.
Perfect, perfect. No, that's very helpful. And this is also, we recognize that some low-hanging fruit here is just in connecting people into the resources and making sure we're breaking down those language barriers, you know, those connectivity barriers altogether, communication barriers. So we'll continue to do that. And then you know, I don't want to keep going on the heat and cold unless anybody has anything else to add when it comes to the winter storm Uri. I know we talked a lot about heat, but I know that there's that was a big impact to busted pipes and still houses in disrepair. Anything else to add on that from anybody?
I just want to add just a little feedback from the community. The orphan ditches, that has been a major concern in the Northeast area. Because of the orphan ditches, the water that is accumulated in a heavy rain is not able to leave the new community because the orphan ditches are not maintained by the city or the county, and they're not identifying which ditches belong to whom. Then they're inundated with grocery store carts, furniture, tires, car parts, and things like that. So when we look at these studies and look at mitigating flooding, we have to get the water to leave the community, to go to the bayous, and Hall's Bayou is our factor, and to then go to Lake Houston and then the ship channel, Lake Houston, and then Galveston. So we need to put some attention into the orphan ditches to have a clean out done up and through the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky.
I agree with you, Vicky.
Okay. And before I pass it back, we have about 10 minutes left. Before I pass it back over to Lynn Henson and to share some more resources that we have, I wanted to just settle on some notes about culture, historic heritage, cultural assets. Is there anything that anybody wants to share about, you know, how you would like to see you know, various assets or your culture, your community preservation of such in this plan? Is there any nuances or anything that we really need to understand and make sure is reflected?
I would like to see Union Pacific come up. Yeah, I would like to see them be more of a neighbor. I would like to see them do some tunneling, where studies have shown that if they were to send some tunneling underground, because in the Westcott area, which is parallel to Parkhurst, the railroad track, the water runs to leave the community, but they have a big hill and it hits that hill and the water rolls back. So the area of Rosewood, I'm not over that super neighborhood, but I am sensitive to the fact that the water rolls back and floods. So Union Pacific is a big force in this area. And if they were to participate in these studies or be brought on board so that they can do things to mitigate on their side and let this water leave this community, I think that would be a very positive impact.
Okay, noted. They're on my target list. A number of reasons. Anybody else?
We have a lot of horseback riders out here also, and we would like to give them some outlet. They have no outlet, and it's a shame how they have to ride on the streets. You know, where we are, where the pedestrians are, and you know, if we could connect their culture in this plan, I think that would be a big plus for the community, because we don't want to lose our culture that was here way before we got here. That was even way before the old 300 came to Texas. And those who know about history would know what I'm talking about.
All right. thanks,
Yes, those of us do. Also, I'm sorry, let me chime back in. Also, the assets that we have on Tidwell for the Halls Bayou, which has the walking trail and the bike trail and all of that. There's no asset. You have to actually park your vehicle at the Valero and take the chance of crossing the street to get on that side unless you're coming from the Fiesta side. So I know it would probably take private dollars, but we need to partner with someone or some organizations so that we can try to get a little parking pad or something so people can park there like they do on the Sims Bayou, the Buffalo Bayou, and the Little White Oak and the White Oak Bayou. They all have approaches to the bayou without taking the chance of having to cross the street.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Vicki. And Juan, were you gonna say one last thing?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we capturing the this community had the last African American run school district in the state of Texas, and so capturing, making sure that history is preserved. So education is it's a very big piece of the history of this community. I mean, I would say that probably one of, even though I didn't attend none of the schools here locally, but I mean, one of my fondest memory when I was coming over here was actually the way these elementary schools and high schools would put their own little parades together. It was very fun to see. So, you know, just kind of keeping that memory alive somehow
Okay,
through the literature or something.
okay, thanks, Juan. And we haven't heard from Ivory Mayhorn. Please, you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah, this is Jackie Mayhorn.
Oh, Jackie Mayhorn.
Yeah, I'm with Northeast Super Neighborhoods United. And I'm really concerned, and we're putting the information out to Councilmember Tasha Jackson also about Robbins Landing. What is the impact of that project as far as the flooding that went on in that area? We're really concerned that the detention part is not adequate.
Okay, noted. I don't have any good answers for you, but noted.
Why do everybody want to rock the phone?
All right, Abner, did you have one final thing to say?
Yes, you know, if you know, we say we want rooftops because we want an HEB, we want other amenities to come into our community. You know, we need to come together as a community to really identify what we really want, because it's exhausting when you work so hard to finally get rooftops and then you say you don't want rooftops. Flooding happens in the city of Houston, all over the city. It's just part of life in the city of Houston. And the last time we've ever had a major development in this area was 1970. I'm 57 years old. I don't think I can wait 20 more years to see a magical wand to happen. So as a community, we really need to identify, do we want amenities to come? Because rooftops has to happen. In terms of flooding, that can be prevented. Habitat has an awesome plan. They're gonna have a meeting at ACC to talk about the flood mitigation that they have in plans. And it's an awesome, as a matter of fact, the majority of their money went toward flood mitigation. And so please come out to that meeting so that you can hear from them. It won't be a concern because they've worked very hard, because nobody wants to flood. Nobody wants to build anything where you're gonna flood. So
I hear you,
please
Abner.
come to that meeting, because nobody wants to be in an area, including myself, where it floods.
Okay.
Yeah, so Abner, nobody's saying anything about we didn't want any development. The question is that putting us at risk with a flood? And so we have a flood plan that we got from Jim Blackburn, and all we want to do is make sure that we are not digging a hole for ourselves. We need a whole bunch of development out here, and so we need to do that. But
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
cost? So that's my only point that I was making.
Yeah,
And
it
I
was
still
passed by
want
the
to
city.
know.
So if the city passed their permits in terms of flood, that means they got the green light. So let's let the experts speak on that. And when we meet at ACC, then we can better communicate with them because this is out of their jurisdiction. You know, us talking to them, but let's meet them at ACC and allow them to give their case, because this is an awesome project that's coming to East Houston, and I'm excited about it. And we
All right.
support it in East Houston.
All right, Abner, I don't want to cut you off, but looking at the time, I want to be respectful for everybody. Thank you for that comment, Jackie. Thank you for updating Abner on where to continue that conversation, but certainly noted. And we'll take a look at that in the evaluation and concept design. Going back to Lynn. Lynn, do you want to wrap it up with anything? And then back over to Vicky. This is your Super Neighborhoods meeting, and we appreciate all of you for your time.
Well, thank you, Danielle. And I see I have 2 minutes left. So I really want to point out, I'll wrap up and say all of our surveys, our meeting information is on letstalkhouston.org/East Houston. You can find that information. You can find the meeting links there. Also, Ms. Vicky stole my thunder in terms of highlighting one of the best city resources, and that is 311. If you ever have any issues and concerns and want to report something, 311 is the place from the ditches that may have trash in them. There are different response times depending on what gets reported, but it is a very important tool because we can track and capture what is being reported and where resources need to be spent. And there are different tools like the trash app. There's an app you can download on your phone and find out when your trash collection is. And I will thank everyone that participated, that has contributed. Your voices were heard loud and clear. There were some great comments that were given this afternoon, and I asked the consultant team to help us coordinate those responses and bring that back to you in a plan to make sure that we've heard everything, building upon what you've already done. And thank you and have a good evening from the city of Houston. And back to Ms. Vicky.